Lawrence, the Catholic School Board in London is not going to put the Book of Negroes on its reading list because it has the N-word. Why do you think that's a bad decision?
Well, I went to school in Toronto in the 60s and 70s, and there wasn't a single Black or Indigenous or Indo-Canadian or Japanese Canadian or Chinese Canadian voice represented in the literatures that we read. And in this move on the part of the London Catholic District School Board pushes us back decades. It basically eliminates the possibility for students to be asked to read as a class Black literature, because most serious Black writers who are writing about serious issues will occasionally use the word as they're writing about their own lived experiences. That word, unfortunately, is part of our lived experience, so we go to it sometimes in our literature.
So we reached out to the school board and they sent us a statement. I'll read it now. The well-being of our students always comes first. The LDCSB is not banning or censoring books. However, we take an informed approach that certain books containing triggering language and content should not be required or mandatory reading for assessment in our schools. We must be mindful of the diverse sensitivities and experiences of our students. So it's interesting, Lawrence, we're talking about, first of all, not banning the book as opposed to not putting it on a reading list. And the school board is saying that it's concerned about the sensitivities of students, which generally is a good thing to be concerned about. What's your response particularly to their statement?
Well, I'm concerned about the sensitivities of students too, as are all good teachers. As for triggering language, most books that examine serious issues involve triggering subjects, whether it's the Diary of Anne Frank or The Handmaid's Tale or Washington Black by S.A. Adrienne or Brother by David Cherry Letter from Birmingham Jail by Martin Luther King. These examine subjects that can disturb, and cause readers to think, which is the whole point of art. It is effectively a ban, but even though the language pretends that it is not, because it prevents teachers from assigning books with the N-word to be read by entire classes. So a teacher can't contextualize that book, can't introduce the book to the students in a thoughtful way, can't ask students ahead of time, which they will if they're comfortable engaging in such a book. And so it does effectively prohibit the teaching of such books to classrooms. So even though the board says it's not, it is effectively a serious impediment to the reading of serious Black literature in high schools.
I want to bring in another voice, and this overlaps a little bit with the conversation you and I have had so far, but let me just play this from a professor at Memorial University in Newfoundland. He's spoken out on this topic before, and here's what he had to say.
I think that we need to approach this conversation with the understanding that not all Black students are the same, that we're not a monolith, and that the ways in which different Black students might engage with that word or, embrace that word might be completely different. So some people might have no issues with it, and then other people, it might be a point of concern for them. And I think the sensitivity that instructors or educators are able to bring to the conversation would be helpful in that regard.
Yeah, so Lawrence, we have about 90 seconds left. Let me ask you this question coming out of that statement. How would you approach it as someone who obviously, you're a novelist, you love literature. If you wanted to teach a book with the N-word to a high school class, and some people are going to be sensitive about that, how would you approach that?
Well, first of all, I discuss the book in detail ahead of time with the children, the students, the teenagers. They're usually 16, 17, 18 years old, so they understand what they're getting into. I'd give them the opportunity, as good teachers do, to back out if they don't feel comfortable. Most of them will not back out. I would introduce the history and the social context in which this language is used. And I would introduce to the students the fact that although on one hand, the word is painful and is associated with violence inflicted upon Black people over the course of centuries in Canada and elsewhere in the Americas, on the other hand, it's been completely reappropriated in Black culture by hip-hop artists, filmmakers, novelists, and the like. And so students need to understand how to navigate a world in which, on one hand, it's a heinous insult And on the other hand, it's being used left, right, and center, and students hear it all day long before and after school. So we have to equip them to navigate this complicated and ambiguous word and understand it and use it respectfully and engage with each other with the understanding that it can cause harm and pain, but it's also abounds in Black culture. How to navigate that? I would help students try to understand that duality.
I love the fact that we can have such a measured conversation about a topic that for some is very emotional. Lawrence Hill, thank you very much.
Thank you.